At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
When did making plans get this complicated? It's time to streamline with WhatsApp, the secure messaging app that brings the whole group together. Use polls to settle dinner plans. Send event invites and pin messages so no one forgets Mom's 60th. And never miss a meme or milestone. All protected with end-to-end encryption. It's time for WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone. Learn more at WhatsApp.com.
It is Monday, October 6th, 2025. Welcome back to Hang Up and Listen, the sports podcast here at Slate. Back with you again this week. I'm Alex Kirshner. I'm a contributing writer for Slate, and I also co-host the college football show Split Zone Duo. First up this week, we'll talk with a Slate staff writer, Nitish Pawa, about how the federal government has quietly, for all intents and purposes, made sports betting legal even in the states where it isn't officially. We'll dive into the world of predictions markets and how they are changing the face of betting. We'll discuss the very early collapse of Bill Belichick's tenure as a college football coach, which already looks just completely doomed at the University of North Carolina, only a month and change into his first season. And we will discuss the rapid escalation of a conflict between some of the WNBA's most talented and influential players against the WNBA's very much embattled commissioner, Cathy Engelbert. As usual, joining me this week is Lindsay Gibbs, women's sports lead at CBS Sports and the publisher of Power Plays, a newsletter covering the key stories of the moment in women's sports. Lindsay, how was your weekend? Keep pounding. Nice come from behind dub by the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, NFL is back and college football doesn't exist. So, everything's good.
And naturally, we've got one Ben Lindbergh with us. Ben is a senior editor for The Ringer, and he co-hosts the Effectively Wild Baseball podcast. Ben, how was your first weekend of division series watching?
Oof, it was intense. We are not talking baseball this week because we're right in the thick of things, and whatever we say would be immediately outdated. But rest assured, I am experiencing daily, nightly, heart attack level anxiety. Just by extension, I'm not even rooting for any particular team here, but postseason baseball, always extremely anxiety inducing.
Have you been fully Shitlerized? Is that the way? Shitler mania?
Not quite. You got to make sure that you say the first L, which is Schlittler.
Schlittler. Yeah, sorry. Okay.
Crucial. You are not the first. That is something that broadcasters have struggled with throughout his tenure. But yes, the Cam Schlittler game, unfortunately, he could not help the Yankees in the first two games of their division series against Toronto, in which they got shellacked. So they need Schlittler to ride to the rescue again.
The Vladimir Guerrero Jr. bat flip on the first Grand Slam in Toronto Blue Jays postseason history was swaggerific.
Yes.
So cool.
Majestic. Jose Bautista-esque.
Yes. For most franchises, that would be the coolest bat flip they've ever had. But the aforementioned Jose Bautista bat flip about a decade ago. Time really does fly in this world. Anyhow, before we get into our business, as always, we want to say thank you to our Slate Plus members for making this show possible. Subscribing helps us make Hang Up and Listen, and it allows you to get it ad-free, which is a great perk. But you also get bonus segments, and I've got good news. We have one of those live for you right now, if you're a Slate Plus member. It is about the NFL's selection of Bad Bunny as the Super Bowl halftime show act, and the political fights that the NFL does and does not pick in these tumultuous times. There's been some backlash, and the NFL doesn't seem that worried about it. You can hear that episode right now as long as you're a Slate Plus member. Subscribe by going to Apple Podcasts and clicking try free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangupplus to get access wherever you listen to your podcasts. I live in California, and if I want to bet on sports, it's not so much that I can't do it as that I have to either drive to Las Vegas or do it via an offshore website where I might deposit funds via cryptocurrency and in theory would not have any consumer protections if something went wrong or my money got stolen. In California, we are in the minority among American states because 38, plus DC and Puerto Rico, have some form of legal sports betting. But a couple of big ones don't, mainly us here in liberal California, and also not so liberal Texas. Legislators and voters in these states have seen or anticipated the social ramifications that come with legal sports betting and said, nope, don't like it, not for us. But it increasingly seems like those restrictions in the states that still have them are in name only. In the past year or so, so-called predictions marketplaces have ratcheted up their sports businesses. The most famous of these, a marketplace called Kalshi. On Sunday afternoon, I went over to Kalshi's website during the first half of some NFL games, and I couldn't bet on the Buccaneers to beat the Seahawks in the middle of that game, because that wouldn't be legal. But what I could do was buy a predictions contract on the outcome of the game. So for 67 cents at risk, I would get $1 back if the Buccaneers won, or for risking 33 cents, I could predict that the Seahawks would win. And if they won, I would get $1 back, and I would make a nice 67-cent profit per dollar, not wagered, but predicted. Just on Kalshi, there had been more than $12 million in bets, or predictions, on this one game at the time I checked. And the cool thing is that this is completely legal, regulated by the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission, and now even hooked into the Robinhood investing app, which you might remember from GameStop or AMC or any of those meme stock stories over the last few years. Slate staff writer Nitish Pahwa recently wrote about this phenomenon in a story headlined, "The legalized gambling industry is collapsing in on itself." Nitish, first off, doesn't feel like this should be allowed. Why is this allowed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree with you. It definitely should not be allowed. The issue is that, as you were talking about with the betting markets and the CFTC, because one form of contract through prediction markets where the way they try to separate it out is that they say, like, look, this is a collective thing. There is no, like, guy at Kalshi who's like the house, there's no like a hoard of cash sitting there that will be dispersed later. It's like, this is all money that we're putting in together as fellow traders and deciding on our own where the price is going to be set. So because of that, they say that they're not a typical sports bettor, like one that would be regulated under the Supreme Court's ruling. But because of this different system, they should just be allowed everywhere. And it's very funny because you can also totally trace like their permission structure to Trump, because it was his CFTC in 2020 that first allowed Kalshi to begin more operations stateside. The Biden administration cracked down a little bit more on Polymarket, but now they're also going to be coming back stateside, and they're really promoting like NFL bets and such. And yeah, Kalshi now has Donald Trump Jr. as an advisor there. It's got a few agency people, classic revolving door stuff, who can come on to advise it on how to approach regulation. But the Trump regulators don't care. There are a lot of red states that do care, but the folks up top do not at all. And I think that's in part, one, because of places like Kalshi and Polymarket. They have big ties to crypto. And of course, as you know very well, Alex, the crypto lobby has a huge influence on this White House. But yeah, and they're also just not interested in regulation really at any level. So yeah, we're just kind of going state by state again. Some states like Maryland and New Jersey are locked in court battles with Kalshi right now, saying, hey, we already have a sports betting structure and you're not part of it. And of course, they're fighting back in court and hoping that the feds will eventually bail them out.
Reminds me a bit of the legal wrangling over whether daily fantasy sports is gambling, a game of chance or a game of skill. It's not the same issue, but it just shows how squishy the distinctions can be and the legality as well. And I wonder what the effects of this will be when it comes to how inundated we are in advertising for these things. Because up to this point, the amounts of money being wagered have been fairly small beans in the grand scheme of things. So if you're sort of extremely online, or if you're in the media, or if you follow politics, you're probably pretty aware of Kalshi or Polymarket. But the broader awareness pales in comparison probably to, say, online sports books. So are we about to be blanketed, or are we already being blanketed in advertising for prediction markets the way we were for online sportsbooks before that market was mostly carved up? Or is there not enough capital, enough of a war chest built up for that to happen yet?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that places like, again, I'm going back to Kalshi and Polymarket mainly because they're kind of the two biggest players in this space. They have a lot of money just from like VC backing, and that's allowed some, good advertising marketing on their part. They're definitely not as saturated as, your DraftKings, Caesar Sportsbook, whatever. Like, I haven't seen too many like Kalshi sponsored podcasts, say, or I haven't seen a Polymarket on a billboard at a Spartan Stadium in Michigan State, the way I have for Caesars. So it's definitely not quite there yet. And I think the traditional sports books have an advantage in that, they've had some time to figure things out with regulators. They've built up like an actual revenue structure. They make money, which as of right now, Kalshi and Polymarket don't really. Polymarket's whole thing is that like, oh, we don't take a transaction fees because we want everybody to participate. So you've seen a little like digital advertising thanks to the VC chest and some physical advertising. I mean, when Eric Adams started getting in trouble last year, there were some posters that Kalshi put up in Brooklyn that I saw, like basically inviting us to bet on the mayor's future. But that, of course, is very different from sports. So we're not there yet. I would not be surprised if they do ramp it up, but they're going to have to figure out how to make money.
Yeah, it's interesting because Kalshi, I think, long-term expects to make pretty much all of its money, or the vast majority, based on transaction fees. But if you kind of comb through the internet and check people's experiences with Kalshi, some people have reported, like if you dive through Reddit threads about this, paying massive transaction fees. Some people have reported that they have not paid transaction fees on Kalshi transactions. It's kind of weird. I think that in general, the lights are kept on by people paying a fee to trade predictions contracts. But that's interesting because it's different than the way that the sportsbook makes money, which is just making a market and trying to set the odds so that they're winning no matter who ultimately wins a sporting event. And that's not always possible, but taken in the aggregate, that's the reason why the typical odds on a point spread are minus 110, right? Why you have to wager $110 to win $100 is the house advantage. There's actually kind of an argument here, I would imagine, that Kalshi is a bit, I can't believe I'm saying this, a bit more progressive in that there's not exactly a house. There's just a market maker taking a trading fee.
They're woke.
Yeah. I was thinking of that too. It's like from a public health perspective, is vaping bad? Probably, but maybe it's better than smoking. It's like, that's maybe the comp here for prediction markets versus sports books. I guess like if these do really take off, is that less bad for society than all the effects that we're already seeing?
Personally, like a lot of my biggest objections to prediction markets come from, I mean, I just don't think it's a good idea to try to bet on democracy elections. I mean, especially at a time of, heightened tensions, violence. I mean, we've already seen some wild schemes in the sports betting world, obviously, that have resulted from the permissive gambling structure, and I just don't want to see that applied to more of our institutions. And again, now that sports betting has been around for a while, we also now have these detailed reports, studies, anecdotes, stories just about how many people have gotten hooked in the traditional casino structure. And I don't think we have those types of studies or just general literature on how addictive necessarily prediction markets are in that aspect. I do think there are a couple things we should be wary of going forward, though. I mean, one, like, all these places have Discord servers. They're also very much like social networks, very anonymized. They're where a lot of people come to just like also talk shop in addition to placing their bets. Polymarket has also partnered with the AI chatbot Perplexity. It says it wants to become like a source of like real-time news. And I mean, I don't need to tell anyone on this podcast, I don't think that AI bots often hallucinate, get things wrong, especially in real-time scenarios. And then when you're trying to land on like one actual outcome in order to delegate the money, it's always pretty controversial. So I suspect we'll be getting more literature just on like what the impact of like predictions betting is versus like the more traditional sportsbook casino style. But I would not be surprised if they go for a model that keeps hooking people as much as possible, especially since, again, if they're not making money, they have to have attention.
I am dumb about this stuff. I'm just going to admit, like, gaming, not my thing. Betting, sports gambling, not my thing. Like, not my, super hardcore passions and interest. So in that case, when I was reading about this, I was surprised at how similar the interfaces looked to the FanDuel, to the DraftKings that my boyfriend, uses daily and things like that. And, when Alex was talking about setting the lines, like you set, when you're the sports book, you set the line to try and make sure that you make money, right? And to get people to put money on certain things. But the lines look similar in the predictions market, but how is that working? Does that question make sense? Like,
sure.
Who is setting these lines?
The theoretical benefit of something like a Kalshi, like a prediction market, is that the lines are essentially set like stock prices are set. People sell contracts at a price. And so if I would say that if I think an NFL team has about a 70% chance to win a game, then I'm going to sell a predictions contract that would make me a 30-cent profit on $1 risked in the prediction market. And if I think there's a 50% chance, then I'm going to sell a predictions contract that would pay me 50 cents for $1 risked. And that's before any transaction fees would come into play. And the idea that, advocates of these kinds of prediction markets put forward is that this is actually very cool from an academic perspective. Because it allows you to get a sense of what the conventional wisdom is or what the market wisdom is of the likelihood of basically any event happening. And sports is obviously an important market for these kinds of companies, Tish, because it's sports. We're all watching all the time. But the top markets on Kalshi right now at this second are next U.S. presidential election winner. J.D. Vance is a 33-cent contract. Gavin Newsom is a 21-cent contract. There's right next to that Pro Football Champion, because they don't have the Super Bowl license like the sports books do. So they have to call it Pro Football Championship. But you get, what will Mr. Beast say during his next YouTube video? Will there be a 7.0 earthquake, 7.0 magnitude earthquake this month? I don't know that it's good or necessary for us to have access to what people think about the likelihood of these events. And I also think there's a lot of potential for abuse because, as the hedge fund guy Bill Ackman has said, there's no insider trading regulation law on a platform like Kalshi or Polymarket or what have you. But that's the idea, is that you're getting a really free market perspective on the likelihood of basically any event that you could imagine.
And the fact that they're so similar to the actual like FanDuel lines is that, you can't separate the two, right? Because people are looking at those and basing some of their decisions off of that. Is that the sense?
Generally speaking, they're going to be fairly close to each other. I know that there are people who try to do arbitrage, where you, and people do this with sports books too, but where you try to exploit differences in the essentially odds or prediction prices between markets, different sports books. I don't know who has the time to try to make money that way, but Nitish, I am kind of struck by how clear it is that this is just taking the sports book mindset and not only applying it to states where sports betting has not been legalized, but applying it to every possible event.
Yeah, what stood out to me about your piece, Nitish, is how much coordination there seems to be among the various entities in this space, which I hadn't realized. And it reminds me a little bit, we're going to talk later on the episode about the WNBA and Unrivaled. And are those complementary entities or are they inherently competitive? And as you documented in your piece, there's been coordination not only among some of the companies that are operating or launching prediction markets like Kalshi and Robinhood, for instance, but also some partnerships or potential partnerships between some of these prediction markets and the sports books, even as they're opposed by, say, indigenous tribes and some regulators. So what's that about? I guess I understand the prediction markets sticking together, but why would the online sports books, who could potentially stand to lose business here, want to be in bed with the prediction markets, or vice versa? Is there some future where there's an acquisition or they just merge, or is there a way for them to actually collaborate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, my cynical thought is, as you mentioned, that this will lead to just like a bunch of mega mergers, frankly. Like every industry works its way toward a consolidation, and I would not be shocked at all to see, like, say, Robinhood, Kalshi merger, or something else just as weird and just as dynamic. And I think there's one reason for a sports book to like partner with the prediction apps, which is that if the prediction apps can get away without the hurdles of the regulatory state, basically, like whether, you know, we're going state by state or federally or elsewhere, they realize that, you know, they're not on the road to nationwide dominance in the way that the prediction markets might more quickly be. I mean, poly markets, you know, already been super popular here thanks to VPNs. So I think they just view that as a way of like a, you know, if you can't beat them, join them.
Pew published a survey last week showing that an increasing percentage of Americans view legal sports betting as a bad thing, both for the country and for sports. And interestingly, men, especially young men, so the audiences that are most likely to be betting on sports, were particularly likely to have turned on it and to now regard it as a bad thing. And of course, there was a debate about why that is. Is it that having been exposed to the harms firsthand, they now have seen the error of their ways and they realize that this is evil? Or is it because they're just sick of their friends talking about parlays all the time? Either one is possible. But if there is a sentiment change there, if the mood is kind of slowly but surely turning against sports betting, does that work against the prediction markets entering this market? If that tide is kind of turning, or does that even hasten that vibe shift, essentially, if everyone's sort of getting more and more sick of this and we're seeing more and more societal ramifications and fallout from this, then maybe adding fuel to the fire actually spurs regulation or more people to demand some sort of limits?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is that when there has been like conservative or like Republican right-wing pushback on like the gambling apps, it's often been around that very point. That's why you've seen some of these like lawsuits, legal challenges occur in states like even, you know, West Virginia. But yeah, I think the way that, again, the way that Polymarket is really trying to brand itself is they want to be seen as also news. They want to be seen as polling. They want to be seen as a very legit institution that has its finger on the pulse, literally, because it's gotten people to put money behind what they're saying online. And by framing it that way, it sounds obviously a lot more highfalutin, a lot more legit. I don't know how persuasive that argument will be, frankly, but it's definitely one that's taken up by a lot of the, you know, crypto diehards for sure. And as for Kalshi, I mean, I don't know how much they think about this stuff, honestly. And I think the same is true for Robinhood or for any other network trying to get in on this. I mean, like, I don't know, like, if you'd call meme stocks addictive per se, but I mean, it keeps
yes,
people
I would call them.
coming back.
I would call them that. Yeah.
I will take Alex's word on that. I mean, yeah, like in that case, I mean, I feel like this is more like forgiveness than permission down the line, right? And if there will be eventually like, you know, some sort of like broader national moral turn against these things, I think the only regret they'll have is that they didn't pocket more money even sooner, like while they could, because ultimately they will just leave this behind and pivot to something else that's just as like legally sketchy.
Nitesh Pawa, Slate staff writer, thank you so much for joining the program. It was great to have you. We'll put your story in the show notes.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Great talking to y'all.
Up next, a disaster in college football. Not Penn State's either. Talking about a different one. This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. That's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies, so you save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
And Doug. Here we have the Limu Emu in its natural habitat, helping people customize their car insurance and save hundreds with Liberty Mutual. Fascinating. It's accompanied by his natural ally, Doug.
Limu, is that guy with the binoculars watching us?
Cut the camera. They see us.
Only pay for what you need at libertymutual.com.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Savings vary. Underwritten by Liberty Mutual Insurance Company and Affiliates. Excludes Massachusetts.
From the preseason to this college football season, I had this weekend's game between North Carolina and Clemson circled on my calendar. I thought it would be an interesting test to see what new North Carolina head coach and six-time Super Bowl champion head coach Bill Belichick would have in his bag scheme-wise, going up against a team that made the college football playoff last year, has won a couple of fairly recent national championships, and would just have better players than North Carolina. I wondered, so what could the best coach of all time do with his playbook to try to make this a little bit more even? It was kind of a cool football experiment to contemplate. Well, we saw this game on Saturday. It was in Chapel Hill, but the game wasn't exactly what we would call it. It was more of a demolition. 38-10. Clemson, which is not good and now has a 2-3 record, marched into North Carolina to Chapel Hill and just put it on Bill Belichick and the Tar Heels. But actually, the game wasn't even the thing that most people will remember from this destruction of North Carolina. It was this UNC student who was featured not once, but twice on ESPN's broadcast of the game.
I went to that game, and that was one of the saddest feelings I've had in university so far. And I've failed midterms before, so it's saying something.
Tough, in part because that correctly implies that there was an even worse North Carolina game only a month or so ago. We talked about it at the time when a very hyped Belichick debut at North Carolina went up in flames, also at home against TCU. But Lindsey Gibbs, you're a North Carolina fan, born and bred. And it does feel from a national perspective like we reached a new depth of, good Lord, this is not working and it's never going to work with what happened against Clemson this weekend. Are you ready to give up on Bill Belichick in college football?
I wouldn't say give up, but I said at the beginning of this, I'm fully embracing the mess of it all. And if that was good mess, I would enjoy it. If that was bad mess, I would savor that in a way as someone who always thought this hire was questionable and honestly doesn't like Bill Belichick that much. So there is a certain level of enjoyment that even though I root for the Tar Heels, seeing them be this spectacularly bad is something else. I mean, Alex, I think you said at the beginning of the season that you thought that probably they were going to be just like normal bad and just kind of fade into the background. But that wasn't good enough. You know, they had to it's been on a, it's been headline generating levels of bad that honestly I'm not used to seeing from Carolina football. And I'm not used to anything good from Carolina football, but this is different. I mean, this Clemson game to me felt so different from the TCU game because it was over in like the first 5 minutes, right? The TCU game didn't turn into a blowout until the second half. This was 28-3 after the first quarter. I mean, it was just they were showing fans streaming out of the stadium midway through the second quarter. I mean, that's how over this thing is. And then you have the broadcast almost reveling in it as well, punctuating it with these interviews from UNC students explaining their despair. It's become, Carolina football has become the car crash that everyone on the other side of the freeway is slowing down to watch. It's almost remarkable how bad it is.
Yeah, some of the attention is just because of the star power of Belichick, because of all of the Jordan Hudson stuff that we've discussed, the schadenfreude that clearly Lindsay is not alone in feeling. But also, this was just a drubbing. As you mentioned, 28 points allowed in the first quarter, which people were quick to point out that was the most ever allowed by any Belichick coach team in one quarter. And the combined score differential now against Power 4 teams, they're 0-3. They've been outscored by 120-33 in those games. So what I want to know is how much worse is this than expected on the field? Just putting aside all the off the field scandal stuff for a second, because this past week, Tar Heels GM Mike Lombardi, longtime Belichick associate, sent a letter to donors in which he tried to brand this as a rebuilding year. And Belichick kind of avoided that. He omitted the re and just went with building. And he said, we're honest with the players, honest that we're building. And if you want to be a part of a program that's being built, then we're here for you. Some of the players pushed back on that pretty publicly and said, well, we're not here to rebuild. We're here to win. So is this a retcon? Is this just trying to change the narrative and say, well, this team was never supposed to be good? Or is there truth to that? Like, put Belichick aside, either his brilliance or his washedness, whichever you were expecting coming into the season. How good should this team have been?
This was supposed to be a bowl team. 6-ish, 7-ish wins. Some would say 8. I think there was a range of outcomes that people thought. But this was supposed to be a decent team. Middle of the pack in the ACC, which is where North Carolina usually is. North Carolina has had a few disastrous 2-ish, 3-ish win seasons this century where things have gotten bad. One of those got a coach fired, Larry Fedora, better part of a decade ago, which led to Mac Brown, whose ouster then led to Belichick coming in. But North Carolina is a pretty consistent bet to make bowl games. That's one of the things that you can say for this football program over the long term. And they were supposed to do that again this year. They started the season ranked number 53 in SP Plus, the projection system by ESPN's Bill Connolly, that I think is one of the better true quality metrics to assess teams across the sport, in a sport where most teams don't play each other and they only get 12 games. They started there at 53 and they are now 101 out of 136. So yeah, I mean, this team is way worse than we thought. Lindsay, I want to get your thoughts on how much it seems like Bill Belichick cares or doesn't care about what's happening here, because I think that's where this gets really interesting. Over the offseason, the stuff with his very young girlfriend and sort of business associate, Jordan Hudson, made a lot of waves, all negative for North Carolina. You know, he had an interview with CBS's Weekend Show that sort of went up in flames because of the management of that interview by Hudson on his own book tour. There was a report from 24/7 Sports this morning that North Carolina's official football account had not posted about Drake May, the former UNC quarterback, having an incredible game on Sunday Night Football last night, beating the Buffalo Bills, who were undefeated, in Orchard Park, because Belichick had an edict out not to post anything Patriots related from North Carolina accounts. Then I will note that in the hours after that report came out, North Carolina did finally post one clip of Drake May doing something in that game. But there was also this thing confirmed by Bill Belichick that Patriots scouts have been banned from North Carolina practices, which is especially bad because North Carolina's roster is not very good, and these players need every chance they could possibly get to get scouted if they want to go into the NFL. All of it put together, it just seems like Bill does not really give a shit about North Carolina football and cares a lot about Bill Belichick. And I don't know how that plan will fly in the long term.
Yeah. It takes an incredible level of ego to become a head coach of an NFL team and to become one of the most successful. And I don't say that necessarily in a derogatory manner. It's just the reality, right? To lead that many people, to believe you are the best for that job, to dedicate yourself in the way you need to. It's often one of the attributing factors to greatness that we see, like, on a maniacal level, but it can also be the downfall, right? And I think, like, we are seeing this ego that was once put towards control in a way that was effective with the Patriots until it wasn't, put to use in comical effects, really, to me. Like, the level of control that Belichick is asserting, I do find it comical. It's so out of touch. And, ESPN had a great observation during the game when it was out of hand. By that, I mean, like, 8 minutes into the game against Clemson, when they were like, usually on college sidelines, you see there are people, maybe it's the backups, maybe it's some coaches whose, like, job is to keep the energy levels up on these sidelines, to be hype men, right? To be channeling into this.
Legions of these guys. They're everywhere.
Right. Like, mascots almost. And there was none of that, they were saying, on the UNC sideline. And it's because all of the people are just Belichick people. There's no college football crazies in this world. And I wonder, how much do you have to just embrace the craziness and the silliness of college football to be successful in it, right? And trying to if you take all of that out of college football, are you to professionalize to become this 33rd NFL team? Are you taking away some of the soul that makes even the really elite programs tick?
Yeah, what interests me about this, aside from the football, is what you just said, Alex, that it seems like Belichick cares about Belichick. And he's doing a lot of damage to the Belichick brand. Even as Jordan Hudson tries to trademark every saying that he's ever had, it seems like he is really harming his reputation here. And in general, I'm not a big believer in the concept of tarnishing a sports legacy. I tend to think that's overblown. Like, when a player sticks around, plays maybe a little too long, they lose it, and you see them struggle, and people say, oh, he's tarnishing his legacy. I don't really believe in that for the most part, unless you're O.J. Simpson or something. I tend to believe that we remember the good times, the highlights, the peak, and none of that changes if you stick around after you're past your prime a little bit. Okay, it doesn't change the numbers that you accrued, the championships you won in your prime, and ultimately that's going to be what people remember most. There are cases where maybe half your career is the decline phase, kind of Albert Pujols-esque, and that can change how people who only saw you during that period regard you, but he's still going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But Bill Belichick, he has a lot at stake here, and I think he cares about that because he just published a book called The Art of Winning, which it seems like he might need a refresher on, right? So he wants to be known as a winner. He wants to be known as a brilliant coach. He had that reputation at one time. Maybe it was deserved, but with each lopsided loss, it gets harder to hold on to that because you could just see it in real time, people reevaluating, wait, was he ever that great? Or was it Brady the whole time? Which was, of course, a debate that raged for years. Who was most responsible for the Patriots' success? Was it Belichick? Was it Brady? Well, given that Brady left New England, won a Super Bowl without Belichick, Belichick's Patriots sucked at the end. And here he is just seemingly running this program into the ground while also becoming kind of a laughingstock for his personal life. This is an actual case where, because it's tough to untangle athletic talent from a coach's prowess, and you can always kind of debate whether it's chicken or the egg there, now he's making it easier and easier to say, well, maybe he wasn't even that great to begin with. And I don't know how fair it is to hold 73-year-old college coach Belichick responsible or to apply that to what he did when he was riding high. But you can see why people are saying that. And so the worse things get and the longer he sticks this out, I think it actually does significantly tarnish his legacy.
I think this is the number one thing that a lot of people are going to think of first.
Yeah.
About Bill Belichick. So Jordan can make sure that they have control of as many trademarks as possible about Bill Belichick's brand, but it's not a very good brand.
Yeah.
When this is the thing that people are most associating with it. North Carolina has a couple years left, 2 years left on this deal with him. I see no way this contract gets completed. I just can't imagine it, but the buyout would be very expensive. It would be many, many millions of dollars for North Carolina to fire him the clean way this season. I don't know what you do here. I think the two parties need to look for a way to end this as quickly as possible. And Bill needs to go off to a beach somewhere or back to media. In 2024, he was a media commentator and he was pretty good at it.
Yeah.
And people aren't focusing as much on who he's sleeping with when he's a media commentator as when he's the head coach of North Carolina. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, there was a time, remember when we were talking about the buyout clause, like if he were to take another job, if he got hired by an NFL team, what that cost, and then as of June, that would cost him $1 million, right? No one's talking about that anymore. It's not like anything he's doing is going to get some other team to poach him from this program. So now it just becomes, it's a fortune because a few years of this are guaranteed. So I do wonder, though, usually you'd think, oh, he'll make them pay every penny. But in this case, because it does seem like he actually has incentive to get out of here too, if he's not super invested in this and also probably doesn't really need the money, then maybe there is some way they can come to an agreement or a settlement here so that they don't have to pay full freight to offload him.
Yeah, just to punctuate everything, a Reddit stat that I read is, I'm not a stat head, but I think this just sums up why this has been an unmitigated disaster and there is no saving face. There is just ending this as quickly so that people can move on and you can get distance from it. Quote, "This is the third game of the season where UNC's margin of defeat is greater than the age of Bill Belichick's girlfriend." Where do you go from there?
The jokes will continue until morale improves, and I have to tell you, I don't really think that morale is going to improve. Up next, we'll talk about the escalation of a players versus league office conflict for the ages in the WNBA.
With Multiview from Xfinity, you can watch up to 4 football games at once, which can lead to some tough choices.
French toast nibblers or breakfast nachos?
Actually, I was thinking about heading out only because I want to beat the traffic.
The best part of the sleepover is the next day. I was going to throw the games on.
Bobby Big Wheels.
I mean, how can you call yourself a sports fan without Xfinity? We got the multi-view.
The best college and pro games all in one place. I'm not going anywhere.
This is how football was meant to be watched. Xfinity. Imagine that. Restrictions apply. Multiview requires Xfinity 4K capable TV box.
Imagine fast hydration, combined with balanced energy, perfectly flavored with 0 artificial sweeteners. Introducing Liquid IV's new Energy Multiplier Sugar-Free. Unlike other energy drinks, you know, the ones that make you feel like you're glitching, it's made with natural caffeine and electrolytes. So you get the boost without the burnout. Liquid IV's new Energy Multiplier Sugar-Free Hydrating Energy. Tap the banner to learn more.
Last week, on our bonus show for Slate Plus members, we talked about how the Minnesota Lynx and their head coach Cheryl Reeve had really let the WNBA league office have it over poor officiating in their loss in the semifinals. A consensus had formed, seemingly reaching a public fever pitch, about the WNBA needing to improve its standards for how games are officiated. But Lynx v. the W was just getting started. Shortly after our episode went to podcast air, the Lynx's best player and a leader in the WNBA Players Union, Collier, took to a podium and had some things to say.
At Unrivaled this past February, I sat across from Kathy and asked how she planned to address the officiating issues in our league. Her response was, well, only the losers complain about the refs. I also asked how she planned to fix the fact that players like Caitlin, Angel, and Paige, who are clearly driving massive revenue for the league, are making so little for their first 4 years. Her response was, Caitlin should be grateful she makes $16 million off the court, because without the platform that the WNBA gives her, she wouldn't make anything. And in that same conversation, she told me players should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for the media rights deal that I got them.
It was a lengthy statement, more than 4 minutes long, by Collier, but mentioning Clark was smart because it got more people paying attention to this, I think. As Lindsay put it, it demonstrated a good understanding of the attention economy that we all live in. The WNBA commissioner, who Collier was talking about there, Kathy Engelbert, was asked about this exchange with Collier before the league's finals, which are ongoing. And the commissioner seemed to obfuscate a bit, talking about how hard this entire episode has been for her and her family. ESPN then reported that Engelbert's press conference showing had led to the cancellation of a planned meeting between her and Collier, where they were going to discuss everything that was going on. That was going to happen against the backdrop of some very contentious collective bargaining that is currently happening between Engelbert and the players. Lindsay, first things first, how much of this entire scene is a collective bargaining power play by Collier and her peers? And how much of this is the league's best players just really not being down with or not having a repairable relationship with the commissioner of the WNBA?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a little bit of both. I mean, when you're in the middle of CBA negotiations, everything is viewed and done in that context. But I think it's important to note that Collier's statement, which I think will go down as like one of the most powerful and influential, like prepared remarks we've ever kind of read from an athlete in a setting like that. She didn't ask for permission for that. She did not collaborate with any other players on this message. By all accounts, the Players Association did not know that this was coming. So while she was, of course, she was speaking as, you know, she is a vice president of the Players Association. She is involved in those negotiations. She was speaking very personally. And she was speaking as someone who, ever since this meeting that she referenced with Kathy Engelbert at Unrivaled in February, the one where she alleges that Engelbert said those comments about Caitlin and said that all the players should be on their knees, grateful, thanking her for the broadcast rights. It seems like this has been really simmering ever since then. And I think when you look at Engelbert, what is true is that she just comes from the corporate world so heavily. I mean, she's Deloitte through and through. And I think as a woman to advance in a field like that and to those levels, there's a certain level of coldness and callousness that you develop. I think maybe being impersonable is almost an asset in her former career, whereas this is a much more public-facing role, and it's much more emotional. You know, women's sports I don't mean that as like women are emotional, but just that sports are emotional. And this is about livelihoods, and it's about representation, and it's about, you know, the viability of females as athletes. And it's about all these things that you're juggling at all times. And I think what's true is she's not been able to connect on a personal level with these players in any way, shape, or form. And there's no trust. And so while she has been, the business of the WNBA is booming, and I think she's made a lot of successful decisions and a lot of questionable ones on the business side. Through it all, she never went out of her way to get to know these players as people and to connect with them. And that's really coming down to bite her. Like, a lot of times in negotiations, there's an underlying respect on both sides, and that doesn't exist here, and that's dangerous.
I do want to ask you more about Engelbert, but I got to ask about Collier too, because I find it so fascinating that she's at the center of all of this, because she's involved in everything really surrounding the WNBA right now. She's very influential, high-profile figure, but she's not the most inflammatory or confrontational figure, right? For her to speak up like this and to be as stark as she was and to pull no punches whatsoever, that gets people's attention. And it sure seems like even if she wasn't coordinating this statement with any other players, she had the approval of a lot of players who seconded everything she said. But, you know, she's the MVP runner-up. She was just eliminated from the playoffs, so she's, you know, been on the national stage lately. She's also on the executive committee of the Players Association. She's a VP, and she's a co-founder of Unrivaled. So she's involved in all of these things. She has credibility both as a player, as a leader in the Players Association, as a business person for having a hand in this successful startup. And so does that make her the perfect spokesperson here, or kind of a compromised spokesperson? Because I've also seen some, is there a conflict of interest here? How can you be on the Players Association committee and also founding Unrivaled? And obviously the players are okay with it. You know, they've let her be on that committee. So clearly they don't seem to be super concerned about that conflict of interest as of yet. But Unrivaled seemingly stands to benefit if these CBA negotiations go south. I mean, in the short term, if there's a work stoppage and Unrivaled's the only show in town, then that's going to burnish that league's profile and reputation. So how do you sort that all out? And is she a perfect or imperfect messenger?
Yeah, it's a tangled web, isn't it? It's a tangled web we weave. I think that she is the perfect messenger because, and she says in her statement, she says, I hope I've, you know, accumulated enough clout, enough respect over the years to deliver this. You know, Fee is not someone who speaks out of turn, but she is respected and she has worked on those relationships. And, you know, she's one of the best players in the league, and that gives you a lot of clout as well. And so I think that for this particular message, she was the perfect person. And I think actually, you know, she went off of her experience seeing her husband run Unrivaled and, you know, act as a commissioner and seeing what goes into those personal relationships building. And, you know, she talks in her statement about the fact that, you know, her husband, if an Unrivaled player gets hurt during the WNBA season, he reaches out, you know, and he's very busy, but he makes sure to maintain this personal connection with players, even though, of course, Unrivaled is a business as well. And nobody, you know, should pretend otherwise. So, you know, I think that because she has that experience, she was able to bring a different insight. And honestly, she was kind of speaking, you know, leader of one league to a leader of another league. The relationship between Unrivaled and the WNBA is a little bit messy, and I understand why people don't like that Collier is on the Players Association and speaking this way, while she would, in theory, benefit from the WNBA. But I don't think Unrivaled works without the WNBA. It's completely different seasons, completely different style of basketball. Unrivaled is so self-contained, and maybe it does have ambitions of being like the new WNBA. I don't know, but I just don't. I think they're complementary or should be complementary. And if the WNBA had handled its business right, would remain complementary. And I think that the only reason I feel like Unrivaled is a real threat now is because of the way that the WNBA is fumbling the bag right now.
I want to ask about Engelbert in particular because I'm interested in characters. I've yet to meet the commissioner who is popular among the players' union during the last months of a collective bargaining negotiation. I'm sure that that's a hard needle to thread. But it seems, having observed quite a few of these things in a lot of sports over the years, like there's really a different level of lacking confidence, lacking comity between at least several high-profile WNBA players and Engelbert. Caitlin Clark did a press conference, had a chance to throw Engelbert a lifeline, definitely didn't do it. Backed up Collier pretty fully. We've talked about the officiating issues in this league. Do people in this league just really dislike Engelbert? And can she survive that, if so?
I think they do. They just, like I said, she hasn't done that work to connect with players. It takes work to build these relationships, and she hasn't done it.
But I guess I'd follow up this way. I don't think Roger Goodell is calling people in the NFL after they get hurt during the season. And yet you don't hear NFL players being like, they got to get Goodell out of here. You know, this seems more like Bryce Harper going nose to nose with Rob Manfred in the Phillies clubhouse and saying, if you're going to talk about this, we're going to fight. I mean, this seems personal. Like, not only you haven't done the work, but like, we don't like your vibes. But maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious for your read on it.
I think there's definitely we don't like your vibes, but I think they feel like they are being undersold and undermined by Engelbert. And, I wrote for CBS Sports, though, that I'm not supporting Engelbert in any way. If she said, I can't imagine if he's a Collier would be making up those comments from Engelbert. And ESPN reported on Monday that they talked to other sources who said that Collier told them about Engelbert's remarks very soon after that meeting in February, which is a way that journalists confirm things all the time. So I understand why they're going after Engelbert, but the NBA owns over 50% of the WNBA when you add in the way that the ownership is structured between a lot of the owners being dual owners in the NBA and WNBA. When you add in that there was an equity raise that included NBA owners, at the end of the day, Kathy Engelbert is not the final say. It is the NBA, and it is Adam Silver. And the truth is, there are so many people in the NBA, and ask anyone who has been in this women's basketball space for years or the NBA space for years, like they have heard it, that just never wanted the WNBA to exist. And resent that any of their money has gone into it, even though when we're looking at the pocketbooks of these owners, we're talking pennies, even when a lot of owners have used the WNBA as a way to hide losses and to, financially finagle things in their own best interest for the NBA teams. Again, it's a tangled web we weave, but I think what Engelbert is doing is reinforcing these party lines that she's hearing on the NBA side, because that's who she has to get a lot of approval for in these negotiations. And these things that she's saying about sustainability, about, players asking for anything more, that's a threat to the league's sustainability, and these notions of gratitude, these are really fraught notions in women's sports. And throwing these notions at female athletes, this is how cycles, it's not exaggerating to say, those notions helped fuel the entire sexual abuse scandal in women's soccer, because whenever anyone would try to come up and find accountability, they would say, nice league you got there, be ashamed if you shook the branches and rocked the boat, and whatever metaphor you want to use, and we had to take it away. So it hurts more when you hear those things coming from someone who's supposed to be on your side, and they think Engelbert's supposed to be on their side. But the truth is, Engelbert is a mouthpiece for a lot of NBA owners. And I'm not saying NBA owners as a monolith feel the WNBA is a burden. Obviously, there are a lot who are buying into it, but It's a mess. And I think Adam Silver and the NBA deserve more criticism in this moment than even Engelbert. And I worry that the players are putting too much on Engelbert's shoulders, because if she goes and is forced out, it's not like the NBA is going to hire some radical to come in.
Yeah, I think that there is still a prevailing misperception about the role of commissioners and just whom they're answerable to, because maybe it comes from the best interests of baseball clause. So people still seem to think of commissioners as ombuds people, like they're looking out for the best interests of the sport. And of course, that's not really what they're doing. They're accountable to the league's owners. And yeah, in Engelbert's case, not just this league's owners, but also the NBA's. And I think what Alex said before about how, yeah, there aren't really a whole lot of popular commissioners. We've talked about that, how commissioners tend to be pretty long tenured. They have good job security, despite the fact that they are pretty unpopular with the public, because in a sense, that's what they're employed to do. They're supposed to be the shield for the owners. They're supposed to be the punching bags and take that abuse to protect the people whose interests they're actually advancing. And that stuff does get even more heated at a time like this, when you have the CBA negotiation and deadline coming up. And there has been reporting, the Sports Business Journal reported that she's likely to exit one way or another after the CBA negotiations. And maybe that would work out well for the league, that you kind of make her the bad person during these negotiations, and then you get the deal that you want, and then you push her out and put a friendlier face on the league. But you know, there have been these blow-ups before. It's like a year ago, right, where she apologized and said she had missed the mark in her comments after players, you know, responded to the social media harassment that they were targeted with, and she just didn't really seem to meet that moment. And Alex's comp of Rob Manfred, that stood out to me too, because it's just sort of smart businessman, you know, smart from a labor perspective, but just not a people person, accused of being tone deaf, just puts his foot in his mouth and has to walk back comments all the time. What interests me about this, and, you know, she didn't deny saying all of the things that Collier said she did.
She did flat out deny saying the thing about Caitlin Clark when asked.
Yeah.
I thought that it was wormy the way that she mostly handled the press conference. She was saying
everything about her is wormy.
There's a lot of what she said. If you go back and watch her press conference, she said often there's a lot of inaccuracies out there, which is you know what you're doing. PR professionals who are listening to the show know what it means to say that there are inaccuracies out there. They know what that means.
Yeah. She said, I'm disheartened by how Nafisa characterized our conversations and league leadership, etc. What is fascinating, though, is that she has presided over this period of massive success for the league, which you would think in many cases would insulate a commissioner from this kind of criticism, or, you know, are they in hot water? Are their days numbered? But there's the question of how responsible for that she is. How much is her doing? How much was her just happening to be in the right place at the right time when the players really catapulted this league to a new stratosphere of publicity and popularity? I mean, they got a big new media rights deal, but even that, even though it's a big increase over the previous one, it's arguably undervalued, as we have discussed on this show. So it doesn't seem as if she's getting much credit, and maybe she doesn't deserve much credit for the league just growing by leaps and bounds under her. And maybe it's also that the league has grown by leaps and bounds, but hasn't made these other changes commensurate with its new profile and revenue and everything, when we talk about the officiating and how that hasn't been standardized. So you would think, just based on the conditions, based on just the, you know, fundamentals, etc., that she would be in a pretty good spot. And yet that's not at all the case, which I think, again, speaks to the lack of diplomacy or politicking here.
Yeah, I will just say, to kind of close us out, that in that press conference last Friday that Engelbert gave, she said that she and Nafisa Collier would be having a meeting this week and to try and smooth things over. But then she flat out denied saying those things about Caitlin Clark, and essentially calling Nafisa a liar. And all reports are now that Nafisa has canceled that meeting, and that their relationship after Kathy calling her a liar in so many words is beyond repair. And I just want to say, we're in the middle of the WNBA Finals, Phoenix Mercury versus Las Vegas Aces. God, I wish we were talking about that.
That is all for this episode. We also have a special bonus show that is live right now for our Slate Plus members. It's about the NFL picking Bad Bunny as the Super Bowl halftime show act, and the league taking up a kind of weird, kind of questionable, we'll see spot as one of the few corporate institutions in America that doesn't seem all that worried about right-wing backlash in these tumultuous times. To hear that, you can subscribe to Slate Plus on Apple Podcasts by clicking try free at the top of our show page, or visit slate.com/hangup+ to get access wherever you listen. The episode is available right now, and we look forward to seeing you over there. Our show notes are at slate.com/hangup, and you can email us at hangup@slate.com. Don't forget to follow the show and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Tell a friend or two that they'd like listening to Hang Up and Listen. We'd love to have them as well. Our producer is Kevin Bendis. For Ben Lindbergh and Lindsay Gibbs, I'm Alex Kirshner. Remember Zelma Beatty, and thanks for listening.